Hello, everybody there. Welcome to this morning's, this afternoon's, or this evening's GWO GWEC webinar on the Global Wind Outlook that we launched last week in Korea. This webinar takes us on a little journey around the EMEA region, Europe, North Africa, Africa, all those sorts of people within the region of the world. We have with us joining today an internal team comprising of my colleague Haiqing Wang, who's our market analyst, myself, Ian Buckland, communication manager. Joining us from GWEC, we have Feng Zhao, who's head of strategy and market intelligence, and his colleague Heba Rabie, who's director of the MENA region. Luckily, we've got some external guests as well. We have joining us in a short while Mariana Batista, who is Senior Advisor on Educational Skills at Wind Europe. And we're delighted to welcome one of our members. From Acciona, we have Emma Reiners, who's Director of Global Marketing and Communications. So we'll come back to those very shortly, and it's great to welcome them. We had a lively meeting earlier on today about the APAC region, and we hope to continue some of those themes today. I don't expect that many of you will have been on both calls, but we do have some super fans out there, so you never know. We're being recorded, of course, so these will be uploaded later on to the GWO YouTube channel for those of you that like to sort of go back and catch some of those bits that you may have missed in the meantime. So first off, I can hand over to our market analyst at GWO, Haiqing Wang, who is one of the co-authors of the Global Wind Workforce Outlook. Over to you, Haiqing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm happy to meet all of you. It's my pleasure to share with you the findings we have on global workforce trends. And also today's webinar is for EMEA region. And we will share also findings on workforce trends specific to EMEA region. This is the 5th edition of Wind Workforce Report. When this report was firstly created, GWO as a workforce development and safety training standardization body, we were curious how many technicians are needed for the wind industry to fulfill tasks in construction, installation, operation, and maintenance, and how well are we prepared to supply the industry with skilled, trained technicians to ensure a fair and just energy transition. And now we're in 2024. These questions are still valid. We know that the players in wind energy transition, they have very ambitious target. We are all striving to a net zero emission pathway in the future. And the demand for a skilled technician is growing year over year according to the growth in wind installation. And we still want to answer this question. In the next 5 years, how many technicians are needed? And where is the gap? And what's the next step for us to keep the pace? And in this year report, our study scope starts from 2024 to 2028. And we should firstly look at the wind installation. In total, there are 791 gigawatts expected to be added in the next 5 years. In this chart, it is represented by the column bar. We can see the pace is accelerating. The annual wind installation is growing year over year. Alongside the column bar, it is installation trajectory we need to follow to stay on to a net zero pathway. It's clear that despite the wind
smartphone connected.
Yeah, despite the installation is growing year over year, we're still falling short of the required pace. And by 2028, we estimate that 532,000 technicians will be needed. globally to fulfill the task in construction, installation, operation, and maintenance. And notably, 40% of them will need to be newly recruited in 5 years. There are two major factors contributing to this 40% figure. One is workforce attrition. As in any industry, workforce attrition is inevitable. And for wind industry, technicians may leave their roles because of the challenging natural environment where wind projects are located. Some other wind technicians may leave because other industries that require similar skill sets can offer better pay. The backdrop is wind installation is growing year by year, and this brings about a growing workload, and the population of wind technicians is required to grow to respond to the growing demand. And we want to have a look at the distribution of workforce demand between onshore and offshore sector. Looking forward, in next 5 years, the demand for wind technicians will still primarily remain for onshore wind projects. And at the same time, offshore wind projects required for wind technicians is also growing. On the right-hand side, we see the breakdown of workforce demand by sector, also by segment. At the bottom, it displays the offshore workforce demand. We're seeing both task-related workforce are growing, will be growing. And for onshore, we're seeing a very interesting pattern that the demand for O&M related technicians, the growth has been flattened. Then the C&I related workforce is expected to drop slightly when approaching to 2028. This is because there is a significant rise in average turbine rating, means turbines are turning bigger, and larger turbines means fewer turbines are required to achieve the goal to generate the same amount of energy. And to our knowledge, this phenomenon is very evident in APAC, specifically in APAC region. What does a larger turbine mean? We don't think it will require a lot more technician in handling it, but we are sure that a larger turbine means a more complicated working environment for technicians. And we think technicians are required to have more specialized skills in working in that environment. And to supply the industry with well-trained, skilled technicians has been our continuous effort. Now we're approaching to the end of 2024. Globally, around 40% of wind technicians are holding a valid GWO basic safety certificate. And this figure will rise up to 60% for regions excluding China mainland. And we believe we are in a good position in assessing the global availability of technicians. So look back in 2019 to 2020, there is a 2-year period in wind technician demand surge. And we believe, we assume that the year after, in 2021, there was sufficient amount of technicians in place to address the wind installation need. Then we assume an organic growth of number of available technicians worldwide. And from there, we estimate that in the next 5 years, there will be 6 to 8% of technician vacancies remain unfilled. This might not cause a critical crisis immediately, but the real problem might not be captured by the vacancy share. We are hearing from our members and many employers that they are facing a growing group of underskilled workers. And we aim to have a well-established talent pipeline. If we cannot have it, this will cause problem. This will pose challenge to the wind installation. In today's webinar, we have Germany and Saudi Arabia and South Africa as selected markets to watch. To look at EMEA region as a whole, in total, 170 gigawatts will be added in the next 5 years, and this is bringing the operational wind capacity to 454 gigawatts. And within this wind installation, within this region, we look at the chart. European countries, they're colored in blue. It's clear that European country will keep leading the wind energy development in EMEA region. But at the same time, we're seeing a very exciting trend for Middle East and Africa. It's colored orange in the chart. They have ambitious growth target, and GWEC forecast the wind installation will grow with a higher CAGR. That's around 20%, which is higher than the EMEA region on average. If we look at the onshore sector, we're saying no single country is dominating the landscape. Not a single country is accounting for over half of the total new onshore wind installation. And this sets EMEA region apart from APAC and America. We are seeing South Africa and Saudi Arabia, they are becoming more visible and they're making meaningful contribution to the global wind energy development. For offshore sector, all new capacity are forecast to be added in European countries. And within these countries, Germany and UK will be taking the lead. In response to the growing wind installation, the workforce demand is also growing. For offshore sector, the offshore technician population is required to be nearly tripled. And for onshore sector, we forecast the number of onshore technicians to grow by 12% to the end of study period compared to last year. And when we speak of safety training, the industry always aim at 100%. For GWO, we target our basic safety training coverage as 100%. And if to compare the number of technicians, wind technicians holding valid GWO basic safety certificate with the total number of wind technicians needed in that region, we can see EMEA has been having very good progress. And
Disconnected.
Yes, and when we look at the in the sub-region, we're saying European still very good progress, and we want to keep the momentum. As explained earlier, the workforce demand is growing, and we want to keep the momentum to keep shortening the gap. And in Middle East and Africa region, there is signs saying maybe the training is lagging behind. Based on our knowledge, there are training providers in South Africa delivering GWO training. And in Middle East, again, based on our knowledge and some anecdotal stories, we hear that employers, wind developers, they're hiring technicians abroad. Then this is a very good example of how the wind industry is benefited from training standard. for Middle East, this region, it's relatively new in investing in wind energy, and a universal standard can promote the efficiency cross border. Now I'll walk you through the selected market to watch their workforce trend. So we start with Germany. Germany is the wind energy development in Germany has generated a lot of jobs, and this trend will continue. Germany will lead the regional wind growth, and in total, 28 gigawatts of new onshore wind and 6.3 gigawatts of new offshore wind will be added. For onshore sector, this translates to over 29,000 of wind technicians by 2028. And for offshore sector, we're saying the offshore technician population grow from 3,600 to over 6,400. For Saudi Arabia, GWEC forecast that around 4.7 gigawatts of new onshore wind will be added. So for Saudi Arabia, all the wind installation will remain for onshore projects. And this converts to over 1,000 wind technicians per year. In the study period, only a slight drop in wind installation. And so for Saudi Arabia and also the region beyond Saudi Arabia, what is the challenge they are facing? And I will leave this question to our panelists. They're very knowledgeable in policy and they have more local experience, so stay with us. For South Africa, wind installation is escalating. In total, GWEC forecast an additional 4.7 gigawatts of onshore wind will be added. And this converts to 2,000 to 2,500 technicians will be needed per year to meet the construction and operation maintenance demand. So with all this being said, I will hand over to Ian. Thank you for listening, and I'm happy to take questions in Q&A session. Thank you.
Thanks, Haiqing. Just a quick handover in effect. We've got some interesting offers about conversations around about Middle East and North Africa, and then we'll come to Heba later on to give us a little bit of information on what it's like from her position in that role. But in the meantime, we're over to Feng to tell us a little more about the overall policy framework within Europe and how this can be described. Feng.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you for the interesting presentation, Haiqing. So now I'm going to take a stage virtually, quickly run through some policy snapshot for three markets, as you can see on the screen. We pick up one representative from each part of the region. In Europe, we pick up Germany, its largest market in Europe, and we have South Africa, the south part of Africa, and we have Saudi from Middle East. Let's move on. I think the first journey, our first stop is Germany. Yes, correct. So I will keep it short, because I think we have the country profile from this GW report. I luckily joined this report launch physically last week at GWEC APEC Summit, where we have Ralph launched this report on the main stage, and with the panelists join that session across the APAC region. But let's take a look what's going on here in Germany. All we know, Germany is the largest market for onshore wind, the second largest for offshore wind. If you put everything together, I think cumulatively speaking, Germany is the largest market. we see some policy challenges before the current federal government. So up and down, primarily after the installation rush. That's end up, I think, more than 6 gigawatts installed in 2017, and then the market slowed down. However, since Russia invasion of Ukraine, I think energy security has driven a lot of investment from the renewable sector. So the new government, the current government, primarily, I think the Minister of Energy or Climate, Robert, who present virtually at Hamburg Wind Energy exhibition as well. I think they got a quite ambitious target for both onshore and offshore wind. And looking at, historically speaking, the largest market, I think, forward-looking, we still believe that Germany will be the leading market in European continent. Onshore wind, I think it's clear if we're looking at the pipeline in terms of auctions, we see an uplift from 2023. More than 7 gigawatt, I think, has been awarded through auctions. Looking at 2024, probably even higher. We're approaching the end of the year. Just looking at the statistics from the GWEC auction, quarterly auction report, I think the market is going well. Robert mentioned during the opening remarks, it's their, I think, plan to have 10 gigawatt onshore wind auctions on the annual basis. If we can get like 10 gigawatt installed on the annual basis, in Germany alone, it's up to a lot of factors, not just in terms of permitting, supply chain, etc. But if we just closely follow the auction result, give them 2 years runway where project construction and executions, it is possible for Germany alone to have something around 5 gigawatts start from next year, 2025. This year alone, we believe that Germany are going to have more than 4 gigawatt onshore wind installation. Offshore wind, up and down, depends on the project COD. But looking at pipeline, 2023, Germany already award nearly 9 gigawatt offshore wind. This year, 2024, 8 gigawatt alone. Of course, you may argue, can we get all this capacity built? Because half of that, it's the capacity has been awarded through, this open auctions, which means that the CBID is selected by the developer. It's not centralized by the government, or CBID survey has been done, assuming for various reasons those capacity cannot be built. And also we have to take into account the general global macroeconomic challenge, what's going on outside of Germany, including in the US, the UK. So 4 gigawatt can be built per year. That will absolutely bring Germany one of the spot market, probably top 3 across global. That's for Germany. A lot of positive stuff going on in the past 2 years. However, as you know, the current government basically has collapsed. So how the policy primarily for renewable will play out after new government put into place in Q1 next year, it's hard to tell. I think we have Mariana join us from Wind Europe. I think some of you joined this call have already seen the video. There's like Wind TV put together by Giles and Pierce from Wind Europe. I think it's true. Having potentially the center-right party on board next year, there will be a lot of uncertainty. But in general, I think the outlook is quite clear. I think no matter who is going to take over the office, party-wise, I think there's nowhere back for Germany to switch back to fossil fuel. I think the transition will continue. It's just up to how many gigawatts will be, rolled out from the government, the new government. Start from 2025. But finger crossed, we believe that Germany absolutely will be a leading market moving forward. So Now let's just continue the journey from Europe to next slide. Probably that's South Africa, if I can recall correctly. Yes, we have two countries, South Africa. South Africa, I think if industry, no matter who you are, join this webcast, either developer or OEM, so it's a big market. I think in general, the government launched what we call this renewable energy independent power procurement program since 2010. But the big problem is that there's lack of policy consistency. The market has been suffering virus, stop. I think there were like an annual auction between 2021 and 2015. So nothing else. It's completely stopped. I think there's huge challenge in terms of project financing, where the utility cannot provide the guarantee in terms of PPA. I think it has scared away the investors. So between 2015 and 2020, there is no auction at all. But in 2021, in January, the government planned to launch 3 round renewable auctions. The first round has been awarded according to the plan, but the second round and the third round got a delay. I think the second round they got delayed, even though the government increased the capacity. Unfortunately, no onshore wind has been awarded. So again, South Africa, how many gigawatt will build? I think policy consistent. That's absolutely a big question mark, and we hope the government can continue the journey to support renewable. There's huge potential out there. My colleague Heba can tell you more about the potential in this market. Now let's move down to Saudi Arabia. Absolutely, it's the oil and gas market. I think 2/3 from fossil fuel and 1/3 from gas. Right now, if you look at the total renewable installation, probably it's less than 1%. Correct me if I'm wrong, Heba. Looking at the pipeline right now, I think the government has awarded 3 big IPP projects, something around 1.8 gigawatt. At the same time, the Chinese division are building the new project. We saw component has been shipped out already last year. We believe some of the capacity will be grid connected in this country. Looking at the potential, here you can see under the name of countries, huge, ambitious target, just annual addition for renewable at 20 gigawatt. What does this mean? If we compare how many gigawatt onshore wind or offshore wind has been installed in total in Europe in the past 2 years, that's even below 20 gigawatt. So again, one single market has huge appetite for renewable, and you can see by 2030, 50% renewable generation target. So again, that's the ambitious target, but probably the audience or including myself will question about if they can achieve it. If you look at what's going on underground, potentially actually it will bring the market up to one of the spot market across the global. Our projection already indicates that once the new projects start coming online, the market will be almost 1 gigawatt level of the annual installation for onshore. Moving forward, 1 gigawatt minimum onshore wind projection. That's in terms of our outlook up to 2030. Heba and myself and my team were working on our H2, the second half global outlook. We're going to look at the market as well. But in general, Saudi not just going to be a leading market in terms of the new installation. We believe that very soon this region will have their own facility for nacelle. eVision has already made the investment plan. Earlier this year, Chinese Mingyang, the largest offshore wind turbine OEM, and also one of the top 4 Chinese onshore wind turbine supplier, they are looking at investment in that region as well. So again, we have a big test for Saudi. The growth in this region will absolutely help to support the installation in Global South. Next slide. I guess this is pretty much a high-level summary in terms of policy recommendation. We launched our APEC supply report. Coincidentally, we have something in common. So no matter to build the local supply chain or build the local workforce to support renewable information, one thing clear, we need to have a strong policy support from the government. Here you can see the first bullet point about workforce target. But you set a target is just a target. Company won't immediately make the investment until they have the firm project pipeline. I think this does make a video that's clear. Target is not a turbine. It's the same case for workforce building. If there's no committed project pipeline, there will be no investment, no construction, no O&M, jobs creation, etc. So for government, absolutely, they have to develop their own strategy in terms of how to build the project pipeline there to create the local jobs. Again, to build the pipeline, build the local jobs, the government should think about the funding program to support the project pipeline, etc. At the same time, provide funding to support the workforce training. Workforce training, we have different ways of training. Of course, we can introduce educational courses, offer the engineering courses for renewables through the university. But another area we cannot afford to missing, that's we need to have the risky program where we need to think about how to transform jobs, skill force from oil and gas industry into the renewable sector in the wind industry specifically for this conversation. In the earlier webcast we had earlier today, that's for APAC region, I mentioned that the transition program, risky program, has been launched already in Philippines, in Vietnam, to support the offshore wind installation. It's the same case, I think, for onshore wind. European, it's a relatively mature market. We see a lot of risky program has been launched, not just in North Sea, in Baltic Sea as well. You got UK, you got Germany, you got Norway, you got potentially right now in Poland. So again, risky program, that's something we need to think about as well. For training program, we also need to think about the gender balance. We need to promote diversity in terms of skill force. We cannot afford to have a renewable industry completely rely on male. We need a female professional to join this journey as well. As GWEC, we have Women in Wind program as well, working closely with the stakeholders across the renewable industry in different parts of the world. It went very well, where we see we actually in Heba Wind Energy host more than 20 female professionals on our global market sector. It's really great to see more female join this entire energy transition journey with us. Last but at least, that's the standard. We see a lot of failure, and also engineer skill force got killed most recently in Australia, and also in the Chinese offshore. I think during the installation rush year back in 2021, one vessels collapsed, more than 30 people died. This is not affordable for a renewable industry where we're talking about sustainability, etc. Not just the installation. I think we have to think about safety and health as well. But how to achieve this? I think that's why we're working together with GWO. We have to embrace the global standard and working force initiative. We have to embed the health and safety from the very beginning. So for this training force, etc. Again, we need national support. We need the regional collaboration. I believe that's the case for Africa as well. It's the same case for APAC region. I believe we need to adopt the same method for MENA region as well. Europe is relatively mature, but again, support how through the technology transition, also the workforce training transition from Europe to emerging market in global south. That's also a way to help to fill in the gap But again, there are more takeaway or details from this report. I encourage you to take your time to take a deep dive. I'm going to stop here. Hand it over to you, Ian. Thank you.
Thank you, Feng. You've given a couple of teasers in terms of some of our other speakers this lunchtime in Denmark. Mariana, exactly. We've welcomed you finally to the opportunity to tell us a little more about your experience working in the European area. And Heba, of course, you've been mentioned a couple of times in terms of your experience in North Africa. And I'd love to get Emma to come in at some point in a little while and talk about what the employer perspective is and how the workforce challenges play out in her world. So maybe, Heba, if you had a few words to say about the situation in North Africa, because Feng was teasing us about your experience, and I know you've based in Cairo, worked in Saudi. Tell us a little bit about what your understanding of the workforce dilemmas and challenges are facing in the Middle East and North Africa. You're muted at this point. Still muted. There you go.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Great. My unmute button wasn't working. Sorry about that. Okay, so of course there's a lot to say about the Middle East and North Africa. Maybe the first thing I'd like to talk about is the challenge of hiring the right caliber in the Middle East, and specifically in regions like and countries like Saudi Arabia. So when we talk about the hiring challenge in the Middle East, three things come to mind. First thing is obviously caliber. So the Middle East is very well equipped when it comes to oil and gas, and I think our speakers have mentioned this a couple of times, but not for renewables. And this is a challenge. So it's always a challenge to find local potential candidates with the right skill set and the proper training. And as an anecdote to this, I have a little story, is that I was also, previous to my job with GWEC, I was working on the development of a wind farm in Egypt. And it was extremely difficult to find a commissioning team locally when we were trying to commission for our wind farm. So we actually had to source technicians and engineers from Spain. And we were very unlucky because this was right smack in the middle of COVID. And we struggled immensely to get the team on site because of travel restrictions, which led to delays in the project. And I think the reason why caliber is so difficult to find is because training is scarcely found in country, which is something that governments need to work on. The second challenge in hiring the right caliber is interest. So even if you find the potential candidates with the right caliber, a significant portion of the jobs, we all know this in the wind industry, a significant portion of the jobs that will become available are blue collar and technician jobs. And let's take Saudi Arabia for an example, as you have mentioned it as one of the case studies. Saudi Arabia, as with the rest of the Gulf region, most of the citizens traditionally prefer employment in high-paying public sector jobs rather than private sector, which is dominated by low-paid expat jobs. As the wind industry grows, and like Frank mentioned, Saudi, has very ambitious plans for the future. Saudi wants to reach 50% renewable by 2030. We believe it's going to be very challenging to find Saudi nationals to take on jobs in construction of wind farms, as well as jobs in manufacturing for wind energy equipment. So as of today, if you look at the statistics, 75% of expats in Saudi are working in construction and manufacturing. And the reason is Saudis don't want to do it themselves. Saudi is now launching a very ambitious localization program for renewable energy. And for this to be successful, we believe that there needs to be more local employees working in construction and manufacturing. So that's for interest. The last point that I want to refer to in terms of the hiring challenge in the Middle East, and Feng again mentioned this before, is gender balance. So this remains the biggest challenge in the Middle East, and not only for Saudi Arabia. This is all over the Middle East. To be able to find women in, to fill engineering and technical positions is very difficult The Saudi 2030 vision has identified this as a problem. So, you know, they've identified that they need to have more women in the workforce. So they've set a target to reach 30% female participation by 2030. But again, I mean, the challenge still remains. I mean, we have that target, but there are cultural considerations that we need to think of, which make it very difficult for females to take on physically demanding positions in conditions such as construction sites or factories. So, I mean, in terms of hiring, those are the three main challenges I can think of. But, you know, with the challenges, that we have a lot of opportunity in the Middle East and countries like Saudi Arabia. I mean, like Feng mentioned, 50% renewable by 2030. The government has targets to reach 16 gigawatts of wind by 2030. Of course, the question is, I mean, it's a target. That are we actually going to reach that target is another question. Saudi only has 400 megawatts currently installed. So these are the questions that, you know, we need to answer and, you know, think of when we think of how we're going to reach that 50% target.
And exactly. Thank you for giving that sort of unique perspective on perhaps the reality of getting that workforce in place in areas where development has a very steep agenda anyway. Mariana, Europe's obviously much more mature in terms of its market and the workforce is at a higher level altogether. Do you still recognize the sort of problems with localization and gender balance in the workforce across the European perspective? Is this something, the localization agenda is, of course, very strong in certain EU members. Is this something which Wind Europe has a perspective on, or is something that you recognize?
Thank you for the question, Ian, and good afternoon or good morning, depending where you're listening from. It's actually very interesting to listen to Heba giving the various challenges because actually, despite the fact that the European market is much more advanced, I still see quite a few similarities on points you were mentioning in mobility and just general awareness of the opportunities that are available. And as you're also asking now, Ian, the gender balance. It's really good to set targets, as you have mentioned, and I'm very happy to hear that there's this 30% target set in place, because if you don't have targets, it's very hard to also measure whether or not you're on track. But this is something that we're still seeing at the European level, that there's quite a bit of work that needs to be done. And a lot of the times it really stems back to actually to STEM education, which was one of the policy recommendations that was already mentioned here on the last slide. Of course, you know, ensuring that we have the workforce for the next 5 years is very important. We see there's a huge gap, but we also need to think about the pipeline or the talent pipeline upstream. So ensuring that also there's quite a bit of work in terms of going to schools, both primary and secondary, to also showcase that there are opportunities for girls and equally boys and anyone else that's also considered a minority group. So the long story short is there's still a lot of work to be done. I think it's really great when you have these you know, these targets set in place. I know, for example, I can share that, for example, in Ørsted, they also have these targets that are set in place and an entire program that's set in place afterwards to be able to follow up and ensure that they can measure or not whether or not they're on track. So there's more to be done for sure. I think it's great to see a panel of women. It's unusual, so that's already a really good sign. But there's definitely more work to be done for sure.
And Emma, you're only representative of the employers here. How are you facing these issues across Europe and beyond? Of course, Acciona have more interests around the world, but in a regional perspective, perhaps.
We do. So I mean, from our standpoint, we're an organisation present across 25 different countries, and those countries, whilst they might be vastly different from a cultural perspective, we're very much facing the same challenges, you know, regardless of where we're operating, and that is, you know, a finite resources of human capital. Although I want to kind of preface this by saying I don't think it's all doom and gloom. I think we need to be optimistic. There is a level of optimism that, you know, we are able to share as an industry, and we see, you know, Acciona and here, you know, we're in a very unique position in that we're an organisation and an industry that is has a consistent call, or I think a unique call when it comes to appealing to people who genuinely want to make a difference when it comes to the fight against climate change. And that's very much a value that's strong, you know, when we talk to millennials and the like. So I think, you know, we have to get better about marketing ourselves and the opportunities, not just from a, you know, engineering and construction perspective in operation and maintenance, but also what can these jobs help you to deliver on when it comes to your own core values. And, you know, that element of the fight against climate change is something that I said is unique, and you marry that with something like mobility and, you know, international opportunities. I think, you know, we have a really compelling case. There are many challenges, you know, that we're facing, and it's only going to get, I suppose, harder when you think about we're competing not only against ourselves and, you know, onshore and offshore is even becoming like, what kind of technician are you? And I find it interesting that, you know, when reading through the report, the delineation between two, it's kind of like, ooh, you know, should there be a requirement that in order to be offshore, you have to have done onshore first, or vice versa, so that we're actually sharing skills within the industry rather than cannibalizing one another. But, you know, not only are we competing against one another there, but then we're also competing against other industries that are decarbonizing and looking at, you know, electrification. And, you know, that kind of green element is so important to so many people. So how can we stand out differently as an employer of choice? I think what the Global Wind organisation has done and the training that's been offered is fantastic. And if you look, you know, I'm quite biased being an Australian. I looked through the report and saw that, you know, there's been huge growth in just the number of training centres. So, for example, back in 2018, there was in Australia 2 GWO centres, whereas, you know, fast forward to 2023, there's 17. So, you know, we are growing, and if you do a very, very quick, simple analysis, say right now, I think we've got 540 GWA training centres around the globe. Yeah. And there's a target of around about 500,000 certified technicians that we're aiming for. I think the gap that we've got between the 280 to the 500,000, you look at those, say 240,000. If we had 100 people go through every single GWO training centre per year, for the next 4 years, we would reach that 500,000 number when it comes to training. So if we break it down into small pieces, I think sometimes the targets and, you know, that we've got to get to 300 and what we're looking at, 320 gigawatts by 2030. We're only going to get to 180. Like, let's kind of break it down and actually work backwards. What is feasible? Because 100 people through each GWO training visit, like, to me, that sounds kind of reasonable, but we have to, as I said, we've got to be optimistic. We're really fortunate to be in the industry that we are. We want to get more people into that industry, but we are going to be faced with many challenges, not only today, but as we continue as well, because there's going to be more competition from emerging industries for talent. So that battle for talent is very much alive and well, and it's going to get even more fierce.
Mm. One of the things we did in this report for the first time was to take a look at the role of artificial intelligence and new technologies. Now, classically, the substitution of labor by technology is a constant theme through the world's economic development. Do you see this as being offering any great potential in the short term, or is this something which is really too far in the future to solve these problems we're talking about in 5 years?
Oh, no, I don't think it's too far in the future. I think the report raised some really interesting elements focusing on maintenance and looking at how we take, I suppose, the requirement from the people, I suppose, focused element there and bring into operations and maintenance and proactive maintenance when it comes to looking at, you know, how can you identify faults within or maintenance requirements within turbines? How can we take that data piece and even elevate it even more so that we're able to it's not so much release the reliance on people, but it's use our people in a smarter way. So if we can automate more, it means that we're actually freeing up those who've got the skills and knowledge within the industry to then be able to use them in a different manner. And something else that I think is really important talking about that, and AI, it has a very important role to play, but I think you marry that with micro-skilling. So, you know, we have challenges, and one of the big challenges is the fact that we've got various requirements, from international requirements to local requirements, and how do you bridge that gap? And I know GWO, you've done some really good stuff with Japan recently, and also the US. So how can we do, you know, micro-skilling in combination with artificial intelligence, and what does that kind of look like? So I think in the short term, you know, for the next two to 3 years, there's some real opportunities that we're going to be able to say, how can we work smarter rather than harder? And technology is going to be a key tool in that discussion.
Interesting, very interesting points. The micro-skilling, we, of course, as you mentioned, we're working with various national associations around the world to create this localization of global standards. It's a dilemma we face in terms of trying to create a level playing field for all people who have a similar skills base to be equally recognized, but also the agenda of have national micro skills is tough. Mariana, you at a European context, this is something which must play out in your working day in and out in terms of different countries' initiatives. Are there any sort of key learnings that we can use across the whole world, in fact, not only in Europe?
Definitely. And I mean, maybe just to add on to what Emma was saying, we talk a lot about what we're experiencing now, which is two transitions, which is the green transition and the digital transition as well. And this has a massive impact when we talk about, you know, it's not just the amount of workers that we need, it's also reskilling and upskilling the existing workers that we have now. We're seeing, you know, a massive change when it comes to the job descriptions, the skill sets that are required, and many of the positions. And I think many people would agree here, and we've seen this, for example, LinkedIn did a recent report on that the job descriptions have changed immensely in the last 5 to 10 years. So suddenly occupational profiles that didn't require so much of that digital skill set now do. And that means we as an industry also need to ensure that we carve out the necessary time for that upskilling, for that lifelong learning, and that there's, you know, a better narrative that comes with it, especially as we automate more. We always say it's great to have, you know, the computers and the machines, but you still need people behind programming said computers and machines. So we often, you know, tend to move away from automation means substitution of workers. Quite the opposite. It actually just means you need more specific and skilled workers that can be able to communicate and share, you know, and understand those large language models. But one example that I wanted to bring is the importance here of when developing training, really working very closely with the industry. One example that comes to mind is a project that's being run by the Technical University of Denmark. It's a project called DG Wind, and they are working alongside, you know, with the industry, understanding, okay, what are the exact digital skill sets that are needed? How can we incorporate those into our existing modules and programs to ensure that the students that we are training and educating, once they graduate, they are already at that level that the industry requires. And this is just one of the initiatives, but the main point here that I want to bring forward is that there needs to be dialogue, structured dialogue and collaboration. It is impossible for both the training centers but academia to be developing when you also have the industry that's advancing at such a fast rate. We often see that that's one of the key barriers, is that there is actually slow development of the educational pathways and the training that comes with it, because the industry is advancing at such a fast pace. So by having that structured dialogue and initiatives where there is this very structured collaboration, we see is actually it's the only way. Otherwise, you see these various stakeholders that all play a very important role actually working in silos. Absolutely.
And we have a limited amount of time left in this afternoon's meeting. If the speakers are happy to continue, perhaps they don't want to raise their thumbs, or we will try and wrap up there so everybody can go on to something else. Right, some hard stops coming up on the call. So any questions, I think, coming in from the audience? Right, we've got one question about standards roles in workforce development. It's come up in in various ways. GWO, of course, has a very clear position on this. Perhaps we'll come back to that on another call. So last thoughts really from across the panel. Feng, and you have a hard stop on the hour, so anything last you want to say about the position of workforce development in Europe?
I don't think I have too much to add here. We have so many regional experts to bring the value for the conversation. But in general, I think the key takeaway from our APEC summit that took place last week is that to get renewable built across global meets the tripling renewable by 2030 target. We need to have this open door policy. When we say open door policy, it's not just the free trade for component, nacelle, material, etc. We need a free trade in terms of workforce as well. For example, our APEC supply chain report released last week found that there are a lot of restriction on vessels. This is just a part of this bottlenecks in terms of supply chain. Another part is in terms of a restriction for the flow of the laborers. You cannot have the crew from South Korea working on the ships owned by the Japanese vessel operator. It could be the same situation across global. So again, if there will be some takeaway from our event from last week, I hope for the rest of regions, Europe already relatively mature. We see a lot of collaboration across the region. Joining the call today from China, but I'm based in Denmark. We see how labor force can support each other across countries around the North Sea for offshore wind. We hope this kind of collaboration can continue, and the regions in North Africa, Middle East, they can learn from the collaboration. So again, knowledge transfer, that's also important in terms of workforce and also standard. I'm so happy to join the call. Sorry, I have to stop you now. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Feng. Emma, interesting point. How about knowledge transfer across the region? How's Acciona working across the globe? What learnings are you most happy to share in a short sentence?
We have a number of programs. Internal mobility is a huge focus for us. We've got at the moment a talent swap, actually, is between Australia, the US, and Spain. 3 months short-term assignments within country, working with different team members and obviously across different projects. So that's one thing that's really important because it plays to that mobility piece. Longer term assignments as well is something that is, it's appealing to different people, but I think that knowledge sharing and having the conversations and having that different project experience is really important. As I said at the beginning, I think we need to maintain an optimistic approach to things because we can just it gets too negative. If we focus on the challenges, there's unfortunately more challenges than probably we think there are opportunities. So I think it is important to stay positive. We're still a young industry. We're growing. As I said, we're going to face more challenges, but we need to embrace those challenges as opportunities for us and be working together collaboratively because there's plenty of opportunities, and as I said, we do have an extremely compelling offering to make when it comes to why you would want to work in wind.
Absolutely. Heba, what does Middle East and North Africa need most from those more mature regions on its doorstep?
That's a good question. A couple of things, Ian. I think, of course, the government has a very big role to play in developing the skilled workforce and attracting the youth to the wind industry. So I think the first thing is there needs to be more focus on education. So education has been mentioned a lot, but we also need to focus on vocational training. For example, if you look at Saudi Arabia, while technical and vocational qualifications are very relevant to renewable energy, the renewable energy industry, less than 6% of Saudis enroll in technical colleges. Compare that to Germany, where 22% of youth enroll in technical colleges. You can see that there's a very big gap in the capability to prepare a skilled workforce So the government really needs to play a bigger role in encouraging the youth to take on these technical jobs. And then the other thing is to really identify and work with trusted partners. So, I mean, you guys had mentioned already, you know, Germany and Denmark being leaders and pioneers in this field. The government have an important role to play to partner with these other governments to provide technical assistance for countries in the Middle East. And I think, and this is, I think, has also been mentioned, you know, private sector has a very big role to play, you know, such as large developers that are active in the country to help support training programs for the workforce. And this is actually already happening in countries such as Saudi Arabia. For example, you know, I'm sure most of you have heard of NEOM, the megacity in Saudi Arabia, and they're working very hard to train youth in Saudi. The NEOM Green Hydrogen company is partnering with the Saudi Energy Authority, as well as other large developers, and they're setting up a very detailed workforce training program for Saudi youth on topics such as green hydrogen, wind, and solar, so that when their youth is ready to enter the workforce, they will have more options and they will be more trained and ready to take on these technical jobs to help support this large deployment of wind in the country.
Wonderful, exactly. Mariana, last but not least, what can Europe do, or what one thing that Europe can do to help the rest of the world, or show the rest of the world that from your vast experience?
I think it goes along the lines to my previous answer, which is collaboration and having platforms to share initiatives that already exist. We talk a lot about trying not to reinvent the wheel. There's a lot of the times that there's certain initiatives that are doing really great in one country, and they certainly can be adopted into another. Of course, the context matters, and that will have also an impact on the success rate or even any changes. But there's a lot of already great work out there, and there isn't necessarily a need to keep reinventing. I think also, as Heba was mentioning, is this fact of how can we then team up with maybe other countries that actually are doing quite well? How can we learn from them? So that's what I would say. I think there's one element here all across the board for all of us, that talent attraction is very important, whether you're going to younger students, whether you're going to the ones who are choosing what kind of career path they want. And maybe just one last point is also attracting talent and targeting very specific target groups that maybe have more of a transferability of skills. What I'm thinking here in mind are, for example, workers or individuals that are coming from the military. How do we have these specific types of campaigns that really attract talent that they do already have some kind of that skills that we're looking for, and then can also ease and quicken their entry into the workforce. But I would say definitely collaboration is certainly key. I think it's no one's job solely to be able to solve the challenges and the barriers that we have. And I think we'll get much further if we work together.
What a wonderful point to end on. Thank you very much, Rihanna. I don't think anybody can disagree with you either. But within wind, we all share the same wind. It's a free goods in that sense. So perfect ending. I would just like to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon, morning. It's been a great source of interest to hear some of the views from our speakers here. I'd like to thank Feng Zhao, who's now left us, of course, from GWEC. We got Heba Rabie, also thanking her from GWEC. Mariana, who had the last word, of course, Batista from Wind Europe. Emma Reiners, wonderful to hear the views from an employer. And last but not least, we have our own market analyst, Haiqing Wang, who took us through the report that was available online. We're going to put up a QR code just so that anybody who hasn't seen the report can get to it directly from us. It's also available from both organizations, GWEC and GWO. Oops,
Yeah,
we seem
for some reason.
For some reason, the QR code is not coming up. So I think we'll just call it a day there, actually. Even thank everybody again, and hope to see you again. We're doing another webinar on the same series next week for the Americas region. And if anybody would like to get a hold of this presentation, then just drop a line on the chat and we will send it to you. Right. Thank you very much,
Thank
and
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye.